My name is Eliza Hartwell, 34 years old. I will never forget the way my father leaned close to me on the night that should have been the happiest of my life. His lips brushed my ear as though he were whispering a blessing only a father could give his daughter. Instead, what spilled out was venom. "You're married now," he said, his breath sour with whiskey and wintergreen mints. "So disappear from this family forever." For a heartbeat, I thought I'd misheard. The string lights above the church hall shimmered. The band played an off-key Garth Brooks cover, and guests clinked glasses with laughter echoing in every corner. To anyone watching, it probably looked like a father sharing tender words with his daughter. But my stomach went cold, as if someone had opened a window in the dead of January. I forced my mouth into a polite curve. Years in the army had trained me well, how to hold a straight face when bullets cut the air, how to keep breathing when your pulse begged to sprint. Compared to that, swallowing down tears at my own wedding was child's play. I pulled away gently, gave him the nod he expected, and walked back toward the punch bowl where Michael, my new husband, was standing in his borrowed suit. He looked awkward but proud, chatting nervously with one of my old high school friends. I slipped my hand into his, squeezed once, and smiled like nothing in the world had shifted. But inside, everything had. My father's words rang like a church bell struck too hard. Disappear from this family forever. The whole day had been layered with that strange, sour note. The hall smelled faintly of wood polish and fried chicken from the Baptist ladies who catered. Simple, yes, but it was ours. Michael's parents drove up from Terre Haute with a homemade cake, buttercream piled thick as memory itself. My old army buddies came in uniform, their boots clicking sharp against the worn linoleum. There was laughter, clapping, rice in the air. It should have been joy. And then there was Dad, Tommy Lawson, 62 years old, with the stubborn dignity of a man who thinks he's never wrong. He wore a stiff suit that didn't fit him, tie crooked, face pink with the effort of acting civil. At his side, perched proudly, was Carla Jenkins, his fiancée, though nobody in town said the word without a raised brow. Carla was bleach blonde, smelled of harsh perfume that lingered long after she left a room, and carried herself like the Queen of Indiana. He'd even put her in Mom's old seat at the front, the seat that should have remained empty in honor of Linda Lawson, the woman who raised me and whose absence ached in every corner of that hall. Seeing Carla sitting there, smiling like she'd earned the right, made me want to scream. I didn't. I walked steady down the aisle, promising myself I could endure one day. But vows ended, rice scattered, and Dad still found his moment to twist the knife. Later, I stepped out into the church parking lot, the January air biting my cheeks. Michael followed, his coat folded over one arm, his breath fogging in the dim yellow of the streetlight. "You okay, Eliza?" His voice was soft, already knowing the answer. I laughed once, bitter. He told me to disappear, said I don't belong. Michael's jaw tightened. He'd never liked my father, but he always respected my wish to keep peace. He said that in front of Carla? No, just me. Just enough so no one else would hear. Michael placed his coat over my shoulders. "We'll go home soon. You don't have to stand here with him anymore." Inside, the music rolled on. Carla's teenage son, Dylan, strutted around in shiny new boots, bragging about the truck his mom's fiancé had bought him. Dad laughed, clapping Dylan on the back like he was the son he'd always wanted. I stood at the edge of the dance floor, watching, my heart burning. It wasn't just tonight's words. It was every holiday where I came home in uniform and Dad barely looked up. Every dollar he slipped to Dylan while telling me I was too independent to need help. Every quiet suggestion that Mom's death was somehow my fault because she'd left the apartment to me. I thought of that apartment off Kirkwood Avenue, peeling yellow paint, ivy curling around the railing. Mom had worked 2 jobs to buy it. When she passed, she left it in my name. Dad hated that. Said family property belonged to the head of the household. But Mom had wanted me to have something that couldn't be taken away. Watching him now, his hand on Carla's back, his laughter loud over Dylan's bragging, I realized I couldn't make him see me as his daughter. But maybe I could make him respect what Mom had given me. So I smiled, wide, steady, wider than the pain in my chest. Let him think I'd nod politely and disappear. In truth, a plan was already forming. The next morning, I woke before dawn in Michael's duplex on the south side of Bloomington. The furnace kicked on with a hollow thud, and the neighbor's porch light clicked off outside. I could still taste the buttercream cake on my tongue and feel the ache in my calves from those ridiculous heels. Michael snored gently, one hand flung across the bed. I eased it back onto the blanket and sat up. In the bathroom mirror, the woman staring back at me had a soldier's stare and a smudge of mascara under one eye. Dad's words pulsed in my skull like a neon sign: disappear from this family. But I wasn't about to beg for a place in the room where my mother raised me. I wasn't asking permission to hold on to what she'd signed into my name. I brewed coffee in Michael's dented Mr. Coffee machine and carried a chipped mug to the kitchen table. Sunlight cut through the blinds, landing on a legal folder I'd set out the night before. Inside was Mom's will, the deed to the apartment, and a letter from her lawyer dated the week before she died. I traced the envelope's ridge with my finger. I remembered her words in that little kitchen, tapping the table with tired fingers. A woman should have something that's hers, not because she plans to run, but because she plans to stand. That memory rooted itself like steel in my chest. Michael wandered in, hair tousled. "You're up early," he mumbled. "Couldn't sleep." He eyed the papers. "You sure you want to start this today?" "I don't want it to fester," I said, wrapping my hands around the mug. "He told me to disappear. He's been telling me that since Mom died. Yesterday, he just stopped pretending." Michael's gaze steadied. "You've got my back." I reached for his hand. "I know." And in that small, sunlit kitchen, I decided I wasn't going to vanish. I was going to fight. Quietly, firmly, lawfully, for the one thing Mom left me. That was the morning my father's poison became the fuel for my fire. The sun had only begun to stretch pale fingers across Bloomington when I set the coffee mug aside and opened the legal folder. Inside, every page carried the weight of my mother's hand. The will, the deed to the Kirkwood apartment, the stipulation she had insisted on in her last months. Paper smelled faintly of dust and lemon cleaner, like the office where she used to meet Mr. Randall, her lawyer. The words blurred for a moment. Not from confusion. My soldier's eyes were trained to scan documents and catch detail, but from memory. Mom hunched over the kitchen table, hair tied back in a scarf to hide the thinning patches. She tapped the table with her finger, her voice low but fierce. "A woman should have something that's hers. Not because she plans to leave, because she plans to stand." That sentence had carved itself into me. Standing. That was what this fight would be about. I dialed the number with fingers steadier than I felt. The receptionist at Randall and Cobb remembered my name. "One moment, Eliza," she said, voice soft like she already knew the storm behind the call. Then his voice came on, calm and measured, like a metronome. "Eliza, I was expecting you sooner or later." I told him about the apartment, about Dad's whispered curse at my wedding, about the joint account that now carried Carla's name and paid for Dylan's shiny boots and flashy truck. I didn't cry. I spoke as if filing a mission report. Straight, clean, without apology. Randall listened without interruption. When I finished, there was silence, then a gentle sigh. "Your mother was very clear. The Kirkwood apartment is yours alone. If you wish to sell, you can list it today. As for the account, Mrs. Lawson anticipated disagreements. She included a stipulation: no funds for anyone outside her immediate family without her written consent. You are within your rights to request a freeze pending review." A freeze. The word felt heavy, like a door slamming shut. "It'll make him furious," I said. "He's already furious," Randall replied. "This will make him lawful." Something inside me clicked into place. What do I need to do? "Come in this afternoon. We'll file the notices, and I'll contact a realtor to begin the listing." I thanked him, voice steady, though my chest ached with the weight of what I'd set in motion. After we hung up, Michael appeared in the doorway, hair sticking up in a dozen directions, holding 2 pieces of toast. "Eat something," he said, pushing one toward me. "You'll shake less." I forced down a bite, salty with butter and nerves. By noon, I was standing in front of the Kirkwood apartment. The ivy I'd forgotten to trim had curled around the railing like it wanted to reclaim the place. Paint peeled from the siding, yellowed by years of Indiana storms. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air was stale, dust dancing in the weak sunlight, but underneath it lingered the faint scent of lemon cleaner, the last attempt I'd made to preserve Mom's touch. Her Afghan was still folded neatly on the back of the couch, exactly where I'd left it months ago. I pressed it to my face, hoping for her. It didn't smell of her anymore, but memory has its own fragrance, sharper than time. "I'm doing it, Mom," I whispered into the silence. "Not to hurt him, to keep you with me." The words sounded strange, but they anchored me. I walked through each room, running my hand along the chipped banister, pausing at the window that used to be mine. I saw myself as a teenager studying here, Mom bringing in tea, her quiet encouragement. For a moment, I felt her hand on my shoulder. "Stand," she had told me. By the time I returned home, I was ready. Randall's office smelled of old books and peppermint. Janice, the receptionist, offered me tea. "Peppermint," she said softly, "like your mom liked." My throat tightened, but I nodded. Inside his office, papers covered the oak desk like maps of a battlefield. Randall adjusted his wool suit jacket and slid the documents toward me. "You'll need to sign here to authorize the freeze, and here for the listing agreement. I've contacted Joe, a realtor, experienced, trustworthy." I signed until my name blurred into loops. "How soon will this hit him?" I asked. Randall folded the papers with care. "As soon as the bank receives notice, likely tomorrow morning." I imagined Dad's face red with fury when the clerk told him his account was frozen, his pride bruised deeper than his pocket. My pulse quickened, but I forced it calm. "Let him stew," I said. Randall raised an eyebrow, but a small smile flickered. "That's soldier talk, Eliza." I met his gaze. "That's survival talk." When I stepped outside, the winter air cut sharp across my face. Michael was waiting in the car, engine humming. He looked at me with that steady calm of his. "Done?" "Done." We drove home in silence, the world outside wrapped in gray clouds threatening snow. My mind played ahead, imagining Dad's rage, Carla's shrill defense, Dylan's smirk. But another image pushed through. Mom's smile, tired but stubborn. The way she tapped that kitchen table. Stand. That night, I barely slept. The house groaned with the furnace, and Michael's hand rested warm against mine, but my mind raced. Dad would come after me, I knew it. Maybe with words, maybe worse. But for the first time, I felt the strength of something he couldn't erase. The line Mom had drawn in ink, now guarded by me. The next morning, my phone buzzed with 3 missed calls. Unknown numbers. I didn't answer. By afternoon, the voicemails landed. Dad's voice first, thick with rage. "You think you're clever, Eliza, freezing my money? Selling that dump your mother conned me into? You're nothing but a soldier girl with no family. Don't you dare cross me." His words should have pierced me, but instead they clarified the mission. I pressed delete. Michael glanced up from the kitchen table, his coffee steaming. "Noise?" he asked. "Noise," I said simply. But inside, I knew it was more than noise. It was the first shot in a war I hadn't asked for, but one I was finally ready to fight. The voicemails might have been new, but the poison behind them was old. Long before my wedding, long before Carla's perfume filled the house, my father had been chiseling me out of his life, piece by piece. Not in one loud explosion, but in a steady drip, a faucet that never stopped leaking until the whole floor was warped. I think the first real crack showed at Mom's funeral. It was March, raw and gray, the kind of Indiana afternoon where the sky looks like wet newspaper and mud sucks at your shoes. Church folks brought casseroles, tuna, green bean, potato, trying to cook the grief out of us. The house smelled heavy, almost suffocating. I stood in the hallway holding Mom's scarf, the one she wore on her last chemo day. She'd asked me to braid her hair when it grew patchy, and when even that was gone, she'd tied the scarf around her head and smiled like it was just another accessory. I clutched it now like it was a lifeline. Dad was in the kitchen, laughing too loud at something Carla said. She wasn't even subtle. She perched at the table as though she'd always belonged there, cigarette laugh echoing against the tile. People whispered, but Dad didn't care. He turned his back on me, shoulders hunched over a beer, and in that moment I realized something terrible. Whatever part of him still belonged to Mom had been buried with her. The years that followed blurred together, but I remember them in snapshots. Easter dinners with Carla at the head of the table, Dylan beside her, already smirking at 13 like he owned the place. Dad bought him a PlayStation that Christmas, while I got a gas card with "Don't spend it all at once" scrawled across the envelope. I said nothing. I was still in uniform, still carrying Mom's memory like armor, but inside I felt like a guest in my own house. One summer, when I was home on leave, I saw Dad in the driveway tossing Dylan the keys to a brand new Ford Ranger. "Every boy needs wheels," he said, puffing his chest. Dylan revved the engine like a king being crowned. I stood there in fatigues, boots dusty from training, and Dad didn't even look my way. That night he muttered something about how I'd never given him grandchildren, as if my service, my sacrifice, made me less of a woman. Then came the joint account. Mom had started it years before, a cushion for emergencies. After she died, Dad added Carla's name without so much as a conversation. Suddenly, money vanished. For Dylan's baseball trips, Carla's salon visits, even the down payment on that truck. I asked about it once, just once. Dad barked, "You don't need money, Eliza. The army feeds you." I stopped asking. But the wound that cut deepest came the year I returned from Iraq. I called ahead, told him I was coming home for Thanksgiving. He said fine. I drove through hours of flat farmland, body still buzzing from desert heat, heart aching for turkey and Mom's stuffing. When I walked through the door, Carla opened it with a wide grin. The table was already set. Plates clinked. Dylan sat at the head like a little prince. There was no chair for me. Dad barely looked up from carving the bird. "You should have called earlier," he muttered. "We didn't plan for extra." I ate a roll standing at the counter, then left before pie. On the drive back to base, I cried into the steering wheel. Not because of the food, but because it was clear. I wasn't part of the picture anymore. Even the town began to notice. Folks at the grocery store nodded politely, then whispered after I passed, "That's Tommy Lawson's girl, the one he never mentions." Carla strutted down the aisles with manicured nails, bragging about Dylan's grades, about how Tommy takes such good care of us. People listened because she spoke like it was already true. The betrayal was never loud. It was slow, quiet, relentless. A chair missing at the table, a check written from the wrong account, a laugh too loud at the wrong moment, a hug withheld. By the time Dad leaned into me at the wedding and told me to disappear, I wasn't surprised. He'd been serving me that poison in small doses for years. The only surprise was how final he finally made it. But final words have a way of sparking final choices. The morning after I met with Randall, I sat at the kitchen table with a notepad. I wrote down steps like a mission briefing. Objective 1, finalize the apartment listing. Objective 2, file the freeze order. Objective 3, don't let Dad drag me into shouting matches. The Army had taught me discipline. I would use it now. Michael leaned against the counter, coffee steaming in his hand. His eyes searched mine. "You just got married, Eliza. We could drive down to Nashville, take a breather." I shook my head. If I wait, I'll talk myself out of it. He's been taking pieces of me for years. I need to draw the line while I still have something left. Michael didn't argue. That's what I loved about him. He wasn't flashy, but he was steady, like bedrock. By noon, I was back in Randall's office, pen in hand. We called the realtor, Joe, who promised offers within the week. I handed over bank account numbers and copies of emails Carla had sent bragging about our savings for Dylan's truck. Randall scanned the papers like a man searching for landmines. "You'll get blowback," he said evenly. "Don't answer it. Let the facts do the talking." I nodded, jaw tight. I was ready. And yet, as I drove past the courthouse dome that afternoon, I felt both lighter and heavier, like I'd set down one burden only to pick up another made of iron, but fitted perfectly to my size. That night, lying in bed, I replayed years of small humiliations. Dylan strutting in his boots, Carla's laughter ringing in my mother's kitchen, Dad's voice dismissing me again and again, and beneath it all, Mom's voice whispering steady, "Stand." I whispered back into the dark, "I will." The apartment sold quicker than I expected. Joe, the realtor with the loud laugh, was right. Student rentals near campus were in demand. Within days, offers started rolling in, each one higher than the last. The papers sat in neat stacks on Randall's desk, contracts with my name inked across the bottom line. But even as I signed, I knew the real storm wasn't about closing costs or deeds. It was about blood. It was about Dad. The first shot landed in my voicemail box. "You think you're clever, Eliza?" Dad's voice snarled, raw with whiskey. "Selling that dump your mother conned me into? Freezing my money? You're nothing but a soldier girl with no family. Don't you dare cross me." I listened once, then hit delete. My finger hovered for only a second, just long enough to feel the old ache in my chest before erasing it like static. Michael raised an eyebrow from the kitchen table, his hand steady on his coffee mug. "Noise?" "Noise," I said, though inside I knew it was more than that. Noise can't cut this deep. Noise doesn't know where you live. The next message came from Carla. Sugar dripped off every syllable. "Eliza, honey, you don't understand. Your daddy's only trying to take care of us. Dylan's about to graduate, and this account freeze is ruining everything. Be reasonable, for once. Reasonable. I laughed out loud. Reasonable had been me swallowing holidays without a chair. Reasonable had been letting Dylan rev his new truck in the driveway while I stood invisible. Reasonable had been silence. Those days were over. Randall told me to keep everything documented. So I did. Every voicemail, every text, every half-threat disguised as family concern. I labeled the files on my laptop like evidence bags, neat rows of dates and times. Dylan was the first to show up in person. His truck roared into my driveway one Saturday afternoon, tires spitting gravel. Michael was in the garage changing oil on a neighbor's car when Dylan jumped out, cocky as ever. "Your daddy home?" Dylan sneered, chin jutting toward the house. "Nope," Michael said calmly, wiping his hands on a rag. "But I am. State your business." "You tell Eliza she better stop this crap. Dad says she's tearing this family apart." Michael leaned against the railing, calm as a man on a Sunday stroll. "Looks to me like your dad did that a long time ago." Dylan cursed, spun his tires, and peeled out, dust cloud chasing him down the street. When Michael came back inside, he brushed dust off his jeans and muttered, "Kids got more horsepower than brains." I laughed, but my chest felt tight. "This is going to get uglier." "Then we'll get tougher," he said simply. That night, lying in bed, I thought of Mom. I pictured her at the kitchen table folding laundry, looking up with that patient smile. "You're doing right, Eliza," she'd say. "Standing your ground isn't cruelty, it's survival." The calls didn't stop. Sometimes Dad screamed until his voice cracked. Other times Carla pleaded like a martyr. Once Dylan himself left a message, his voice breaking through static. "You'll regret this, you cold-hearted," before cutting off. I saved them all. At the community center, where I picked up shifts helping veterans file benefits paperwork, I learned to wear a mask. People whispered, but no one said anything directly. Small towns don't need headlines. They chew gossip into fact all on their own. One evening, Michael and I were walking down Main Street after dinner. The sun had dipped, neon lights humming over the diner windows. That's when I saw Dad across the street. He stood with Carla outside the hardware store, her laugh echoing, his face set in stone. For a moment, his eyes flicked toward me. He didn't wave, didn't acknowledge, just stared as though I were a stranger. Michael touched my elbow. "Keep walking." I did, but each step felt like dragging a weight through mud. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table staring at Mom's framed letter. Her words stared back. "I want my daughter to have security, to know she is not forgotten." I pressed my forehead to the glass and whispered, "I'm not forgotten, Mom. I'm right here." Offers on the apartment grew serious. A young couple with a toddler outbid the rest, paying in cash. Signing the acceptance felt like planting a flag on a battlefield. I'd taken something meant to erase me and turned it into proof that I existed. Still, every victory carried its shadow. The night after signing, a rock thudded against our porch. Michael rushed out, flashlight cutting through the dark. Gravel scattered, but no figures lingered. Just the silence of a neighborhood holding its breath. He came back inside, jaw tight. "They want you rattled." "I'm not rattled," I lied. But when I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the image of Dad standing at that hardware store, his silence louder than any curse. He wasn't finished. He never was. The following Sunday, I walked into church, head high. Conversations hushed as I passed through the fellowship hall. Some people nodded kindly. Others clucked their tongues, whispering words like ungrateful and family blood. One woman, Mrs. Jenkins, no relation to Carla, squeezed my arm. "Your mom would be proud. Don't let anyone tell you different." Those words steadied me all week. But whispers grew louder too. A man at the grocery store muttered, "Can't believe she'd do that to her father." I wanted to shout, "What father tells his daughter to disappear forever? What father sells his child's place at the table for a stranger's laugh?" Instead, I smiled politely and walked away. That's what discipline looked like now. Stillness. Paper shields. A quiet fire that burned steady while their rage burned out. At night, Michael and I sat on our second-hand couch, dog curled at our feet, watching reruns of Jeopardy while my phone buzzed with threats I refused to answer. The rhythm became almost ordinary. Almost. Because beneath the ordinary thrum, I felt something shifting, a tide rising. I knew Dad wouldn't be satisfied with voicemails or rocks in the night. He'd want the fight on his terms, in a place where the whole town could watch. And he was already laying the ground for it. It happened in the produce aisle on a Tuesday afternoon. the kind of moment that seems too small to matter until it does. I was weighing apples, the red skins glinting under fluorescent lights, when I heard her voice. Carla's voice always carried, pitched just high enough that she didn't need to shout, but everyone nearby still heard. "She's just jealous," Carla said to a friend, loud and casual. "Eliza can't stand that her father finally found someone who appreciates him. All this legal nonsense. It's childish." I froze, an apple in my palm. For 1 second, I thought about slipping down another aisle, letting her words pass like smoke. But something in me had shifted since the freeze order. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't going to keep walking. I turned the corner, bag of apples swinging at my side. Carla's eyes widened for a half-second before narrowing into that smirk she wore like armor. Dad stood beside her, pretending to study loaves of bread, though his jaw was clenched tight. Dylan hovered behind them, arms crossed, smirk plastered on like a boy who thought the world owed him respect. "Morning," I said evenly, my voice flat as stone. Carla sniffed. "Morning." Dad didn't look at me. He tossed a loaf of bread into the cart and muttered, "Let's go." They wheeled away, cart squeaking, shoulders stiff. I stood there among apples and oranges, heart pounding, but not from shame, from clarity. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't about paperwork or property. It was about dignity, about Mom's memory, about refusing to vanish while they rewrote the story of who belonged. When I got home that evening, the apartment check sat fresh in my account. The realtor had closed the sale with the young couple and their toddler. I stared at the numbers on the bank screen, but what I felt wasn't triumph. It was weight, responsibility, proof that I had carried through on what Mom entrusted me with. I pulled out the letter she had written 2 weeks before she passed, the one Randall had shown the judge's clerk when the freeze order was first filed. Her handwriting wavered, but the words were steady. "I want my daughter to have security, to know she is not forgotten. I trust Eliza to honor my memory." I bought a frame that afternoon and hung it in the hallway of our duplex. Every time I passed it, I felt her hand on my shoulder. Michael noticed it that night, grease still under his fingernails from work at the shop. He leaned against the wall, reading each line. "That's your manifesto," he said. I smiled faintly. "It's my compass." The days that followed felt stranger than I expected. People began to pick sides. At church, a woman clasped my hand and whispered, "Your mother would be proud." At the gas station, an old farmer tipped his cap, saying nothing, but letting his eyes linger with quiet support. But others muttered. "Blood's thicker than water," I overheard one man say as I passed by. "She should be ashamed." Shame, the word used to cut me. Now it only made me straighten my spine. Dad, meanwhile, shifted his battlefield. He wasn't content with voicemails and whispers. He wanted a stage. The first hint came in a plain envelope dropped through my mailbox. A probate notice. My father had filed to contest Mom's will, claiming undue influence, that I had manipulated her into leaving me the apartment and the account restrictions. Carla's name was listed too, though she had no legal standing. That didn't matter. She wanted her fingerprints on everything. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the papers, the legal words crisp and sharp as blades. Michael leaned over my shoulder, reading silently. His hand landed steady on my back. "Guess it's time," he said. "Yeah," I replied. My voice was steady, but my pulse drummed so hard I thought it might split me in two. "It's time." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My mind flickered through images. Dad's back turned at Mom's funeral, Dylan revving the truck keys in the driveway, Carla's smirk in the grocery aisle. All of it built to this moment. If he wanted to fight in the open, under the eyes of the town, then that's where I would meet him. I thought of Mom again. Not the sick version with scarves and lemon bars at church, but the strong one, standing at the kitchen counter at dawn with a coffee mug in her hand. She always looked like she had already been waiting for me to wake up. In my mind, she turned, gave me that tired but stubborn smile, and said, "Stand, Eliza. Don't beg. Stand." The courthouse loomed in my mind, limestone and solemn. The thought of sitting across from Dad under its dome made my stomach knot, but beneath the fear was something stronger. Resolve. The grocery aisle had shown me the truth. The whispers weren't just gossip. They were battles over who defined me. For years, Dad had rewritten me as an afterthought, Carla as a queen, Dylan as an heir. But not anymore. The letter framed on my wall said otherwise. The sale papers stacked on Randall's desk said otherwise. And soon, the courtroom would too. The Monroe County Courthouse looked older than time itself, limestone dome rising pale against the gray Indiana sky. On the morning of the hearing, the steps felt heavier than my own boots, like each one carried the weight of Mom's voice urging me to stand. Michael walked beside me in a clean shirt and tie, his hand brushing mine once, steady, grounding. Behind those stone doors, Dad waited with his lawyer, Carla draped on his arm, and Dylan smirking like he'd already won. I told myself this wasn't just a fight about property. It was a fight for memory, for dignity, for the line Mom had drawn in ink and asked me to hold. Inside, the wood-paneled courtroom smelled of varnish and dust. The gallery seats creaked as neighbors, church members, and old classmates settled in. In small towns, a probate hearing wasn't just legal business. It was theater. And everyone wanted a front row seat. I sat at the table with Randall, his wool suit immaculate, his leather briefcase open like a soldier's kit. He adjusted his glasses, gave me a short nod. Across the aisle, Dad's lawyer, a slick man from Indianapolis with a too-white smile, stacked papers like ammunition. Carla perched beside Dad, neckline plunging as if the courtroom were a stage. Dylan slouched behind them, headphones dangling around his neck, eyes gleaming with teenage arrogance. When Judge Harris entered, tall and thin-haired, the bailiff's call for order cracked like a rifle shot. Everyone rose, then sat. My pulse drummed, but my hands stayed folded, jaw tight. Dad's lawyer spoke first. His voice carried that false warmth of a man selling insurance. Your Honor, Mrs. Lawson, in her final months, was in a vulnerable state. My client, Tommy Lawson, believes his daughter, Eliza, exerted undue influence. She pressured her dying mother to alter the will in her favor, cutting out her father and his rightful household. The words hung heavy. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. I caught sight of a woman from church leaning toward her neighbor, whispering behind her hand. The lawyer continued, painting me as manipulative, intimidating. With her military background, with her forceful demeanor, she could easily sway a sick woman's decisions. This is not about disrespecting the deceased. It is about restoring fairness. I sat still, nails digging crescents into my palms. He was turning my service, the thing that kept me alive through desert heat and firefights, into a weapon against me. Then Randall stood, calm, measured, each word landing like a hammer driving nails. Your Honor, the late Mrs. Lawson worked 2 jobs to purchase that apartment. Every mortgage check came from her own account. Her choice to leave it to her daughter was deliberate, independent, and fully lawful. He slid a thick folder across the bench. Here are the records. The judge leafed through them, brows furrowing, then settling. Randall moved on, voice steady. As for the so-called family funds, Mrs. Lawson included a stipulation: no withdrawals for non-family expenses without her written consent. Yet records show multiple payments for Mr. Lawson's fiancée, Ms. Jenkins, and her son Dylan. Vehicles, trips, salon expenses. My client, Eliza Hartwell, had every right to request a freeze pending review. I glanced at Carla. Her painted smile faltered. Dylan's smirk slipped. Then Randall revealed the final document. And here, Your Honor, is a notarized letter Mrs. Lawson wrote 2 weeks before her passing. In her own hand, she states clearly, I want my daughter to have security. I trust her to honor my memory. The courtroom hushed. The judge read silently, lips pressed tight. He set the paper down with a sigh. That's when Dad erupted. This is garbage! His voice cracked like a whip. She's been lying since day one, manipulating, twisting everything. Carla clutched his arm, whispering, Tommy, sit down. But he shoved her hand off, red-faced, eyes blazing. Mr. Lawson, the judge snapped, gavel striking sharp. You will remain silent until recognized. One more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt. The room stilled. I could feel eyes drilling into me. Neighbors, old teachers, even the grocery clerk who once whispered pity behind my back, all waiting to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. Judge Harris adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. This court finds that Eliza Hartwell acted fully within her rights, both in selling the apartment and in requesting a freeze of the joint account. The will stands as written. The petition to overturn is denied. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Whispers turned into waves. She won. It was all true. Dad's face went crimson. Carla's mouth snapped shut, lips pinched white. Dylan yanked off his headphones, muttering a curse under his breath. The gavel struck again. This matter is settled. Court adjourned. Chairs scraped as the room emptied, people buzzing like hornets. Dad shoved back his chair so hard it screeched against the floor. He pointed a trembling finger at me, voice shaking with fury. You'll pay for this, Eliza. You think you're better than me? You're nothing without this family. I stood, smoothing my blazer. My voice came low, steady enough that only the first few rows could hear. I already am this family. The one Mom left me. The one you threw away. Then I turned, Michael's hand steady at my back, Randall close behind. Outside, the March air felt sharp and alive, like breathing for the first time in months. Neighbors lingered on the courthouse steps, some nodding, some shaking their heads. Reporters from the local paper hovered with notepads, pens twitching. Michael squeezed my hand. You did it. I shook my head, staring up at the dome. Mom did. I just carried it through. That night, sitting at our kitchen table, I replayed the moment over and over. The gavel, the gasps, Dad's face collapsing under the weight of truth. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was justice, quiet, firm, undeniable. The slow burn had finally boiled over, and in its ashes, I stood whole. The weeks after the courthouse hearing felt like stepping into a tilted world, as though the ground had shifted just a few degrees and nothing sat where it used to. Everywhere I went, eyes followed. At the post office, the clerk slid my package across the counter with a quiet, "Good for you, Eliza." At the gas station, an old farmer tipped his cap without words, but the respect in his eyes said more than any sentence. At church, where whispers once stung, people now stopped me in the fellowship hall, pressing my hand, telling me they'd read the article in the Herald Times. Your mother would be proud, some said. A few shook their heads, muttering that blood was thicker than water, that I'd embarrass my father. But I carried myself steady because I knew the truth. Blood doesn't excuse cruelty, and family isn't a chain you're bound to, no matter how deep it cuts. Dad unraveled quickly. Carla was gone within a month. Rumor said she packed her things in the dead of night when it became clear the account would stay frozen and no money would flow. Dylan sold the Ranger cheap and left town, his bravado vanishing as fast as his prospects. Dad still opened the plumbing supply shop, but fewer folks wanted to buy from him after what they'd heard in open court. Small towns don't forget public shame. He grew meaner, more withdrawn, hunched like the weight of his own bitterness was bending his spine. One afternoon, I spotted him in the hardware store. He looked smaller somehow, shoulders caved, hair thinner. Our eyes met across the aisle. For a breath, I thought he might come over. Instead, he turned away and disappeared down another row. I let him go. For the first time in years, I felt no fire in my chest, just a tired kind of pity. Meanwhile, Michael and I began to build something new. With the money from Mom's apartment, we bought a modest ranch house on the edge of town. White siding, a maple tree in the front yard that would turn gold come autumn. Michael built a workbench in the garage, and I planted tomatoes out back, their vines curling stubbornly toward the sun. We painted the kitchen yellow because Mom always said yellow made mornings softer. On the hallway wall, I hung the framed letter she'd written in her final days. Every time I passed it, the words reached for me like a hand. I want my daughter to have security, to know she is not forgotten. At night, sitting on our second-hand couch with the dog curled between us, I sometimes let myself imagine Mom there. Her laugh in the kitchen, her hand brushing flour off her apron, her voice steadying me the way it always had. I knew it was memory, not presence. But some nights, memory felt holy. The town's noise faded slowly. Neighbors stopped gossiping quite so loudly. Some avoided me, others offered nods of approval. I learned that dignity doesn't need applause. It just needs silence, the kind that comes when people realize they can't rewrite your story anymore. Still, one piece of unfinished business tugged at me: Mom's grave. I drove there on a Sunday evening with a bundle of daisies. The cemetery was quiet, the wind rustling through bare branches. I knelt on the damp ground, brushed leaves from the stone, and laid the flowers gently across her name. Mom, I whispered, voice catching, I kept what you gave me safe. He tried to strip me out of this family, but I held on. I hope you'd be proud. The wind stirred, carrying the scent of earth and winter. For a moment, I swore I heard her voice echoing back. A woman should have something that's hers. I stayed until the sun dipped low, painting the stones gold, before rising and brushing dirt from my knees. Walking back to the car, I felt lighter, like I had finally set something heavy down beside her. Michael was waiting at home with dinner on the stove. Chili, the way he knew I liked it, with extra beans and a mountain of shredded cheese on top. He looked up as I walked in, eyes searching mine. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. Better than okay. He smiled, not pushing for more, just letting the quiet fill the room. That's what I love most about him, his ability to steady me without asking me to explain every scar. Life settled into something ordinary after that. Work at the community center, Michael at the shop, evenings spent in the yellow-lit kitchen. Ordinary, but precious. The kind of ordinary Mom had worked 2 jobs to give me the chance to claim. And yet, in quiet moments, I knew there was one more chapter, one more thread left dangling. Because Dad was still out there, shrinking into his own ruin. And sooner or later, we'd cross paths again. I always thought the last confrontation with my father would be loud, slamming doors, raised voices, accusations hurled like bricks. Instead, it was quiet, almost too quiet. It happened at the hardware store on a Thursday afternoon. I was buying paint rollers, my mind already on the yellow trim in the kitchen. I rounded the aisle, and there he was, Tommy Lawson, my father. He looked smaller than I remembered. Shoulders slumped, face hollowed, hair thinner than it had been even at the courthouse. For a breath, our eyes locked. Time stilled. I expected anger to flare in my chest, the familiar fire that had burned through so many nights. But instead, I felt nothing sharp, just a dull, tired ache. He turned away first, down another aisle, back stiff, steps hurried. He couldn't even hold my gaze. I stood frozen among the shelves of bolts and nails, paint fumes heavy in the air. My hands tightened on the rollers until my knuckles whitened. Part of me wanted to follow, to force the conversation we'd never had, to demand, why? Why wasn't I enough? Why did you choose Carla, choose Dylan, choose everyone but me? But I didn't, because some answers would never come, and some wounds can't be stitched shut with words. That night, I sat at the kitchen table after Michael went to bed. A single lamp cast a circle of light across the wood. I pulled out a blank sheet of paper and wrote his name at the top. Dad. The pen hovered. I let the words spill, not to send, not to forgive, but to release. You told me to disappear. You whispered it like poison on the night of my wedding, but the truth is, you'd been saying it for years. Every time you gave Dylan the keys, every time you put Carla in Mom's seat, every time you acted like my service was a burden instead of a sacrifice. You erased me slowly, drip by drip, until I barely recognized myself in your house. I paused, tears blurring the ink. Then I kept going. But here's what you couldn't erase. Mom's will, Mom's words, Mom's faith in me. She left me something that was mine, and you tried to treat. I didn't fight you to hurt you. I fought you to honor her, to stand where she asked me to stand. My hand trembled as I wrote the next part. If you ever wanted to come back into my life, the door would not open with rage or silence. It would only open with truth, with acknowledgement of what you did, and with respect for what Mom left me. Until then, I will go on living. Not waiting for you, not begging for scraps. Living. I signed my name and set the pen down. The letter sat there in the lamp's glow, heavy as stone. I didn't fold it, didn't seal it. I slipped it into the drawer beneath Mom's framed letter, the one that actually mattered, and left it there, unsent. Because some conversations don't need to be had out loud. Days turned to weeks. The town's noise faded further. People stopped asking, stopped whispering. Michael and I finished painting the kitchen. The maple tree in the front yard burst into spring leaves. The tomatoes in back began to sprout. Life grew, stubborn and quiet, the way it always does when no one's watching. One Sunday afternoon, I drove past Dad's shop. The sign hung crooked, letters faded. A closed placard swung in the window. I pulled into the lot, engine idling, and sat staring at the building. Memories flickered. Him teaching me how to patch a tire, him scolding me for wasting nails, him laughing with Dylan years later like I never existed. I didn't go in. I drove away. Because the truth had settled into me like marrow. My power wasn't in winning louder. It was in standing still, refusing to vanish, letting time prove what courtroom gavels and gossip couldn't. That I was still here. That Mom's line in ink was safe in my hands. That night, I walked past the framed letter in our hallway. I touched the glass lightly, tracing the words, "To know she is not forgotten." For the first time in years, I believed it. I wasn't forgotten. I wasn't erased. I was exactly where I was meant to stand. The last conversation with my father never happened, and maybe that was the truest ending. Because silence sometimes is the only boundary strong enough to hold.